Hey everybody, Crow back again, and this is going to be the first video in a series where we look at the tables in Williams Pinball in Pinball FX3 and see what was censored. So in this particular video, we're going to be looking at Williams Table Pack number 1, which included Medieval Madness, Junkyard, and High Speed 2, the getaway, but I'm also going to throw in the free table as well, and we're going to look at Fishtails. So we're going to look at 4 tables, see what Zen Studios has censored in these tables, and I may give a little commentary about what I think about the changes they made. But if you haven't seen it already, I did do an introduction to this series a while ago, so I recommend checking out that video if you're interested in why things are censored to begin with and what I feel about those reasons. Also, I need to note that as of the release of Table Pack 2, the PC versions can be completely uncensored. There's a family mode switch that you could turn off, and you get to play the tables completely uncensored. Unfortunately, for the console versions like the PS4, the Xbox One, and the Switch, you're stuck with the censored versions. That may change in the future, but as of right now, we're going to say that you're stuck with the censored versions, and it may be unlikely that you will get the uncensored versions. Now, before we actually start jumping into each particular table, I wanted to start each of these videos off with maybe some corrections or additions to previous videos. Now, you may be wondering, how could there be any corrections if this is the first video? Well, I made a pretty big mistake in the introduction video. In that video, I kept mentioning that Pinball FX3 was rated T for teen, and it is in fact not. It is rated E10+. Even when you boot up the game, it has a big, giant ESRB rating on it that says everyone 10+, at least on the PC version. And it was just something I wrote in my notes wrong for that video, so I apologize for that. But as you watch this video, if you see I make any mistakes or miss anything, let me know and I will make an addendum in future videos. However, in most cases, they made it pretty easy to identify what the changes were, because if you go into the legal notices of the menu system, you can flip through the tables there and it literally spells out everything that was changed. Or was it everything that was changed? Well, we'll get to that a little bit later, because I did find at least one instance where I think there was stuff that was changed or altered that wasn't actually in those notes. So maybe that was a little oversight, or maybe I'm mistaken, but we'll get to that when we get to that. But for now, let's start out with the changes made to Fishtails. All right, here we are looking at Fishtails, and the way this is going to work is I'm going to show the censored version first, kind of highlight what it is that was censored, and then pull in the uncensored version for a comparison. So the first thing we're going to look at is on the playfield, and basically the note says it removed the pertinent item from the fisherman, so we're looking at the fisherman in the center of the table now. You may or may not be able to tell what was actually censored from this, but if we pull in the uncensored version, you can see that he had a cigar in his mouth. So of course, you know, you can't have kids exposed to people smoking, and this is kind of an oddly drawn cigar to begin with, because it's not even coming out of his mouth, it's coming out of his beard somehow. So I guess that was a fairly easy edit for them to make. But again, smoking ESRB, that might raise the age rating to T for teen, so it's kind of a stupid, you know, in hindsight, all these changes seem stupid to me. I mean, it is kind of a disappointing change because it is something you do see the entire time you play the game. All right, the next change we're going to look at Fishtails is still on the playfield, but it's way in the back. And we're going to zoom in on the character way back here, this guy way in the rollover lanes, way in the back. You can barely see him. But what was edited from him? What was pulled in the uncensored version? And okay, this is a really tough one to see, but he did have a pipe that was edited out. And based on the fact that I have very limited camera movement in Pinball FX3, this is kind of the best shot I could get. You could kind of see the pipe, but it is kind of being blocked mostly by a post. But this one, again, it's another smoking reference that was altered, but this one is way in the back, and I can't even really see it, even by trying to adjust the camera to see it. So this one is kind of like, okay, not even that big of a deal because you can barely see it, and you're definitely not really going to see it while you're playing, I think. So this one isn't so bad. Still, again, I'd prefer to play uncensored, but again, this is something you barely even notice while you're playing. All right, for the next change in Fishtails, we're going to look at the back box. And we gotta zoom way in on the cooler. Now we're gonna zoom way in on these cans here, And since I'm zoomed in so far, you could barely even tell what it says. It either says slig or stig. I'm not even sure what it says here. But let's pull in the uncensored version. And there's an extra word here I know you could kind of barely see based on how far I had to zoom, but it says beer. So it either says stig or slig beer. I'm not sure. If somebody wants to correct me, go ahead. But basically, they took out the word beer because you can't have beer. Kids can't be exposed to alcohol, even if it is in a cooler. Yep, it's another change you would barely even see if you were playing because you're not really looking at the back box, especially if you're not playing like a virtual cabinet. Again, minor change. I don't think it's that big of a deal. So let's move on. All right, for this next one, we've got to be looking at the side of the back box. Let's zoom in on that, and we can see that there's a mermaid there. Oh, what could have possibly been changed here? Let's pull in the uncensored version, and we see that the mermaid's kind of bikini top has been turned into kind of like a full-length dress. I can't understand why they made this change at all. Because, what, kids don't go to the beach? Kids have never seen, like, a lady in a bikini at the beach or something like that? Even more than that, okay? Think of the movie The Little Mermaid. That movie is rated G. The main character is a mermaid that has a bikini top. I don't understand why this change was made at all. I mean, I could kind of see they were playing it safe. Well, let's play it safe. We can't see this this mermaid's midriff or anything, but really doesn't make sense. I can't see how this would have changed the rating at all, at least in my eyes. So this to me is the most unnecessary change that was made that I'm going to show in this entire video, I think. It's also something that really doesn't matter to gameplay at all because this is on the side of the back box. You're never going to see this while you're playing. You're only going to see this when it flies around the table in this preview mode. So it's kind of a dumb change, I think, but it really doesn't affect anything either. And this is the last change for Fishtails, but if we look at the side of the cabinet, we're going to zoom in on this pelican here. You can see that he's got a pipe. He's the only character that's allowed to have a pipe, I suppose, because, well, it has bubbles. And if we look at the uncensored version, well, those bubbles aren't there. And, well, like the mermaid, he's on the right and left side, so it was altered on both sides. But also, if you turn on the enhanced mode, you'll see on the sidewall art that the pelican is there as well, and with the bubbles. It's really in 3 places. So he's on both sides, like the mermaid, she was on both sides, but also on the sidewall art if you turn on the enhanced mode. But again, even if you do that, that's something you're barely going to see because it is so tiny. But yeah, since the bigger ones are on the outside of the cabinet and you're not really going to see it at all while you're playing, this change is not really that big of a deal, I think. All right, we're switching over to Medieval Madness now, and there was actually nothing changed on the playfield as far as I could tell, but there was a bunch of stuff changed on the cabinet back box. So for the first thing, let's zoom in on the troll on the right side here, and we see in the censored version here what was changed. So let's pull in the uncensored version, and we see that, well, he had a cigar, so that's a big theme here. We got to remove all the cigars, and this one's particularly bad because it's actually smoking, which means he's actually smoking into this thing. He's not in his mouth. But again, kind of tiny. I guess it's a back box thing, and but it is kind of annoying. It takes out a part of the joke, I feel, that the troll is smoking. But we can't have kids witnessing anybody smoking because that's something they certainly wouldn't see in real life. So, yeah, you saw that one coming. So let's move on. All right, second thing on the back box for Medieval Madness, if we zoom in very close to where we were on the King of Pain sword, we can see that he's got a nice, clean, shiny sword. But wait a minute. Let's pull in the uncensored version and we can see, wait a minute, that sword originally wasn't so clean. It's got blood on it. And I guess that we can't have the blood on there. Maybe that would add blood to the ESRB rating, which would automatically bump it up to a T for teen rating. I don't really know how these things work. But Zen Studios was playing it safe, so we got to clean up the blood. And you know what? This won't be the first time we see blood cleaned up on this table. So let's move on. All right, back to looking at the back box for Medieval Madness. We're going to zoom in way in on the lower left-hand corner. we see this woman in the corner, and she's kind of lounging in the moat. She's got a parasol. She might be a princess based on her hat or whatever. But let's pull in the uncensored version, and we can see, whoa, she was dressed quite a bit more revealing, and it kind of adds to the joke a little bit, where it's kind of like this armored bikini swimsuit. Anyway, we can't have kids looking at that. I mean, this is a kind of a tiny thing. It's kind of a joke on the back box, but again, it kind of takes away from the joke if you dress her more like the way she is in the censored version. But yeah, it's something that doesn't really affect gameplay at all or anything, so it's, you know, kind of one of those things where it's a disappointment, but it really doesn't make that big of a difference again. So let's move on. All right, the fourth and final change to the back box, we've got to zoom in on the sword in the logo Medieval Madness, and we see again we've got a nice clean sword, but if we pull in the uncensored version, well, that sword is quite bloodied. And well, if they clean the blood from the King of Pain sword, well, they're going to clean the blood off of the sword in the Medieval Madness logo as well. But the blood actually makes it match the other letters. So it kind of does look like an eye with the blood on it, but you take the blood out and it makes it less obvious that that's supposed to be the eye, because now there's a color mismatch. We're not all stupid. We can still figure out that the sword is the eye, I guess. But in the with the sword being bloodied, it's more obvious that that's supposed to be the eye, and it's a little bit easier to read. But you know what? Aesthetics be damned. We got to remove that blood. Let's move on. All right, this one's going to be really quick. We're looking at the side of the Medieval Madness cabinet, and you can pretty much guess what we're going to look at here. Let's zoom in. Of course, the sword in the word medieval, and let's pull in the uncensored version, and it's the same bloodied sword. And this is on the left and the right side. This change is exactly the same as the last change, only it was on the back box. So nothing more to say. Let's move on. All right, the next one's actually a DMD change. So what we're looking at here is a screenshot from the end of the video mode where you're trying to protect the children, protect the calves. In this case, we're looking at the end of the child one. And if you fail and the falcon takes away the child, it says one child or X number of children or child taken. Well, what was the change here? Well, if we look at the uncensored version, we can see that the child wasn't taken, he was eaten. So they kind of changed the fact that the child was eaten to taken, I guess, to eliminate the thought that the child was eaten. Now you may notice that the screenshot on the bottom is looking a little bit different than the screenshot on top, and that's because the screenshot on the bottom was actually taken from the Pinball arcade. I had actually was playing the uncensored version in Pinball FX3, and I got it specifically into the video mode to look to see if it was fixed, and you know what? It still said taken. So that's something that was still censored in the uncensored version. Now, it's not that big of a deal because it does take quite a bit of doing to get to the video mode to begin with. It's not something you'll see every game. You have to spell fire 4 times at least, get the video mode, get the Merlin shot lit, and then get the video mode, and you have to do this all in one ball. But it still hasn't been fixed, so it may be something that's fixed in the future. Just as of now, it has not been fixed. But again, it's not that really big of a deal. I think this one in particular, I'm still disappointed. It's been censored, but it's not that big of a deal, I think. So let's move on. All right, this next one is actually a voiceover that was censored. The text in the legal resource page specifically says it's using the version free of the pertinent content of the I'm Lord Howard Hertz line. Now, I think that line is this one.
I'm Lord Howard Hertz. Who the f*** are you?
Now, the bleep is not what was censored. That is the uncensored version, believe it or not. That's the one that's actually played in the machine. I don't believe there's a version out there where it's unbleeped. But that line in particular, even with the bleep, was taken out of the censored version. Now, the way it's worded makes me think that there are actually multiple ROMs out there for Medieval Madness, and there's actually a version of the ROM for the real pinball machine that doesn't have that line. But I did play this in censored mode, and it does not appear, but there are other lines. There's other alternate lines that the characters can say that this one just did not come up. So this one, it's a funny line, I gotta admit. I like it when it pops up. So this one is a bit of a disappointment. But while we're talking about voices that were censored in the table, I'm pretty sure that there are damsel voices that were censored in the game, and it's not mentioned in the document. So this is what I was alluding to earlier in the video when I said that I don't think everything is documented. Because when you hit the damsel ramp, usually the damsel will say something, and it's like kind of a random line every time. Now, there were just some lines I did not hear in the censored version, but more to the point, when you rescue the damsel, they'll always say something, but sometimes in the censored version, they don't say anything, and here's an example of that. But also, there were certain sounds that would come up as a rarity, and it was like a Mortal Kombat reference, where when you hit the ramp one time, you'd hear this, or even this. Fatality. And they're kind of in references to the animations that were kind of going on at the time in the DMD, but that's something that I'll talk about shortly. But I think in the censored versions, those sound effects come up a little bit more often just because it's covering up some of the stuff that was censored or removed from the censored version. So what I'm gonna play is a bunch of clips now from lines in the uncensored version that I don't believe show up in the censored version. So here's some examples of that. It may not be all of them, but these are the ones I noticed. And also, I could be wrong, because some of these might show up in the censored version, and I just didn't run across it. So here they are.
I've got a reward for you. I'm getting really hot up here. Ooh, I'm so lonely up here. Big dragon, but I bet you're bigger. Take me, I'm yours. Oh, I always knew that someday my prince would come.
So as you may have noticed, there are a bunch of different damsels. There's the opera singer, the valley girl, the Jewish girl, and the English woman, but I think the one that had the most censored was the saucy wench, and those are just, they're not their official names. That's just what I'm calling them. That's what they were listed in this document I was looking up, so that's what I'm calling them. So the saucy wench has had most of her lines removed, I believe, but that's not to say that other lines were also removed from other ones as well, and I just didn't notice it. I think anyone that references, oh, my prince has come, has been removed, because that could be a double entendre, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, let's move on to something else. We went on way too long with these voiceovers. Let's move on. So the next thing is actually a DMD animation that was censored. And I think they kind of really messed this up. I really do. I think this is like the worst of the censorship we're getting into now, because we're looking at the animation that was censored, and they don't leave to the imagination at all that was censored or leave you any questioning, because they literally put the word censored in huge letters on the screen, and it's very annoying. I feel that they could have just either stopped the animation, or even just a black screen would have been better than just flashing censored on the screen. I don't know if they were thinking it was humorous or whatever, but it's not. This is very annoying. But let's pull in the uncensored version. And by the way, this animation pulls up when you hit the first or second time you hit the damsel ramp. It's a knight fighting the dragon, and as we can see in the uncensored version, the dragon is holding the knight. He breathes fire, and he turns into a skeleton. I guess this had to be censored for whatever reason, because I don't know, maybe it's immolation of fire or something like that. Even though it's done in a cartoony way, it's something you might even see in a Bugs Bunny cartoon. I don't know, but it's not appropriate for kids, I guess, these days. Who knows? But the fact that they put the word censored and flash it on, you don't even see how many points you score. You don't see that the dragon snack. This is the worst of the censorship, I believe. And I believe this is where the sound effect toasty would have come in. So what kind of adds to the oddity is that the fact that the toasty line, I think, comes up more often in the censored version when this animation comes up, but you don't see the knight getting toasted. So it's kind of confusing. Anyway, let's move on. This isn't the only one. Let's move on to the next one. All right, we're looking at a very similar situation here. We see the knight come up to the dragon and then censored. What's going to happen? So let's look at the uncensored version. We see that the knight rides up and slices the dragon's head off. Decapitation, dragon death. And I have exactly the same issues and the same problem that I mentioned before, so we won't go on as long with this one as we did with the last one. But again, this is where the fatality sound effect would come in. So if you're playing this censored and you hear fatality, which I think is bound to come up more often to cover up some more hidden dialogue, you'd be like, fatality? What? It's censored. What's going on? Who got fatality? Did the dragon win? Did the knight win? You really can't tell because it cuts off so abruptly, you don't know what's going to happen. So yeah, the censored version clearly shows that the knight is defeating the dragon. This happens when you hit the damsel ramp right after the toasty one. So after you defeat the dragon, the next time you hit the damsel would be the time you actually rescue the damsel. But yeah, just very annoying that this animation was taken out, and much more annoying that the word censored is flashed on the screen. They could have handled it so much better if they needed to stop the animation or just black out the screen, but don't flash the word censored. I think that's just the worst thing that they did. That's it for Medieval Madness, actually. Let's move on to the next table. All right, next table we're looking at is Junkyard, and right now we are looking at the playfield, or the middle of the playfield, and let's zoom in on Crazy Bob here. So what was censored here? Well, let's pull in the uncensored version and we can see that, hey, it's another cigar that was cut out. This one's actually in his mouth, unlike the fisherman from Fish Tales. But yeah, another cigar taken out, obvious reasons, same reasons. Can't have kids seeing somebody with a cigar in their mouth. So let's move on. So now we're looking in the far back of Junkyard, and we can see that Crazy Bob is in the back wall there. So let's zoom in on him, and we can see he's got the crane. He's looking kind of angry. Why is he angry? Well, let's look at the censored or the uncensored version, and we can see he's probably angry because he doesn't have a cigar in his mouth anymore. Again, same issue. Smoking, cigars, bad, even if it is just a little black blob there. Can't have that, so it's been taken out. Moving on. All right, next we're looking at the back box for Junkyard, and let's zoom in again on Crazy Bob, who's in the crane. He's looking a little bit happy there, but not so happy, because let's pull in the uncensored version. Again, the cigar was taken out, and it's funny because in each of these examples, it gets progressively less and less of a cigar. Here it's like even like just a black dot. You almost can't even tell it's supposed to be a cigar, but it was taken out. Of course, Crazy Bob always has a cigar in his mouth, and this is a case where it gets less and less irritating, because yes, the one on the play field is pretty irritating because you're always going to be looking at that. It is on the playfield. You're always looking at the playfield. The one on the back wall, not that big of a deal because it's far in the back. You might not even notice it. And this one on the back box is such a tiny dot that this is even less of a big deal. You almost can't even tell. They could have left that in and nobody would have ever probably even noticed, but they took it out. And let's move on. And there's one last change that was made on the back box. So let's zoom in on the lower right-hand corner. We can see a lady in a bathtub. Wow, what was altered here? Let's pull in the uncensored version. And there were just a couple more bubbles added to censor a little bit of her cleavage. Honestly, yeah, prefer the uncensored version, obviously. But these few bubbles don't really add or detract that much from it, and it's such a small part of the back box. I mean, it's one of those things that you might not even notice. If somebody said, hey, can you find these 4 changes on the back box, or 2 changes really for this table, there are 2 changes, and you might be looking. It might take you a while to even find this one. It may take even longer to figure out Bob's cigar is missing. But again, it's just such a minor change. Altered, I guess, for kids. Who knows? Does this really alter the rating that much if the bubbles are added or not added? I don't know. Such a small detail to cover up, but they did it to be on the safe side. And let's move on. One last thing for Junkyard. All right, so this is another voiceover thing. Now, The note in the legal resources says various voiceovers with pertinent content and the sound effects when shooting the toilet ramp. Well, the toilet ramp is easy. This is the censored version of the toilet ramp. And this is the uncensored version. So you can see that there was some grunting and groaning that was edited out of the censored version. Removing toilet humor. That's a new one, because usually I would think that they're usually adding in toilet humor for kids, especially in movies, it seems like these days. But here again, they've kind of taken out some of the toilet humor. It's part of the game, I think. So it's kind of a real disappointment that grunting and groaning was taken out, because that is part of the game. That's part of the humor of the game. So they just kind of took it out. You could agree with the toilet humor or not, but it is kind of a way to censor a bit to remove some of the intended humor. Now, as for various voiceovers with pertinent content, whatever else was taken out of the censored version, I don't know. When I played the censored version, I just could not figure out what may or may not have been removed. So I'll just say that it's possible that some voices were taken out. I just don't have any examples of it. So that may be something where I might do an addendum later on in a future video in this series and say, hey, here's a line that was taken out. I just realized. Or somebody will leave a comment that says, hey, this line and this line and this line were taken out. If you do that, I would appreciate it. But I hate leaving it saying that I don't know what was taken out, what voices were taken out. But honestly, I don't know. And I did play it for a while. I just am not taking the extra time to figure out exactly if or what extra stuff was taken out. So again, that might be something I kind of make a correction to in a future video. But as for now, I don't know. All right, let's move on. And finally, we're here at High Speed 2, The Getaway. And guess what? This is going to be really short because there was absolutely nothing censored in High Speed 2 The Getaway. No notes, no changes as far as I could tell. Apparently speeding away from the cops and evading the law is perfectly acceptable for children of all ages. That's fine with me because actually this is my favorite table of the lot. So if you've got this table on a PS4, a Switch, or an Xbox One, you can be secure in the knowledge that you are playing the uncensored version because absolutely nothing was censored. And with that, we're going to end the video. If you made it this far, thanks for watching. Make sure you like the video. If you did like the video, if you liked the video and you have not yet subscribed, make sure you do subscribe because I do have many more pinball videos on this channel, and I will have more videos in this series because I can immediately start working on the video for the censored tables in Table Pack 2 because that is out and I can go running forward with that. So thanks for watching. See y'all next time.